Hello, hello, fearless warriors. Today is Valentine's Day, and this is episode 186. So, as you all know, I am married to probably one of the last amazing men in the planet, James Lee Dannert. And he has no idea that this episode is dedicated to him. And he does listen to my podcast. So I can't wait for his face when he realizes that we are going to be talking about our relationship, how we met, some of the struggles that we have faced, because you cannot be with someone for 17 years and everything is great from beginning to end. Oh no. Let me reassure you that we have definitely had our share of hiccups, our conversations about the big D. Yes, divorce. We probably have had that conversation maybe two or three times, at least two, possibly three. And as someone who has had several relationships, who was previously married, it was probably, we'll get to that. But before we dive into all things James Lee Dannert, I want to share a little bit from a chapter that I wrote. And here's the book, A Praying Wife in Waiting, an anthology providing hope for the woman of God. And this was put on by the visionary Ebony Nicole Smith, who is the visionary who is putting together the writers, the Bold Writers live memoir workshop. And details about that are in the show notes, which is a live 2-day workshop talking about how to publish your book, giving you the tools necessary. And it is 2 days, March 7th and 8th. And again, make sure that you head over to the show notes. And the link for that is ebonynicolesmith.com. So, sharing about my chapter. And my chapter is called The Kids Are Grown and Gone. Now What? I was sitting on the couch reading a magazine when I looked over at James and said, "Oh my gosh, it's just us. Now what?" Bewildered, he looked at me and said, "What did you say?" I repeated myself. I've had, I'm having feelings of doubt, feelings of uncertainty, and a sense of mistaken identity. There are no children to hide behind, no one stealing my time away from paying them attention. My husband, that man that after 12 years, I wrote this 5 years ago, 12 years of marriage, still squeezes the toothpaste from the middle of the tube or puts the toilet paper roll on the wrong way. When the children are grown and gone, you start to notice little things about your spouse that you had never had time to deal with before. But there's a story behind all of this. So, I was in a very toxic and unhealthy relationship that I shared a snippet of that chapter last week in the episode 185. So make sure that you go back to that um, and listen to that episode talking about what is love. But, anyways, I digress. I was in an unhealthy relationship for about 2.5 years, and I finally got the courage to leave that relationship. But before I left that relationship, I had a conversation with God. I was on my knees, crying, snot, tears, everything, looking a hot mess. And I told God that I really wanted to focus on myself. Finally, after having been dating since I was like 14 or 15, never have been alone. I was always going from relationship to relationship, seeking love, wanting to be a part of something, wanting to belong to something, to someone. I told God that it was time for me to focus on my children, to focus on myself. And although I had my laundry list of things that I was looking for in a partner, because women, we all have that list, I told God I wanted who He thought was right for me. So I finally got the courage to leave that relationship, got my own place, was able to safely move out. Not without issues, but that's a whole topic for another conversation for another time. Um, but again, as someone who voiced that I was ready to focus on myself and focus on my children, I was young and women, we have needs. We again, even though I said that I wanted to focus on myself and on my children, the words came out of my mouth, but I think that I didn't think. I know there was a disconnect between my heart and my mind. I said certain things, but the behaviors still need to be worked on. So I created, I got settled in my apartment, and then a few weeks later, I created a MySpace account. Yes, you remember MySpace pre Facebook. This was January of 2008, and I wish to this day that I can still remember what my email address was that I was using, what my password was, because I would like to just read the messages. I remember that part of my profile said, not looking for a relationship, just looking to be wined and dined. Now, mind you, again, like I said, I had just left a toxic and unhealthy relationship. And a couple of days later, if it was that long, I don't really recall, I found myself talking to four different guys, James being one of those guys. And I believe that they were all local. Maybe three were local, one was out of town. I can't remember. Um, but after exchanging messages back and forth with James, he was the first person that asked me out on a real date. And I was like, I don't know about this. So I reached out to a friend. I was like, oh my gosh, one of the guys that I'm talking to wants to go out. And my friend was like, isn't that why you went on MySpace? Because you wanted to meet people? And even though this episode is coming out today, Valentine's Day, I'm actually recording this on February 2nd. Ironically, our first date was 17 years ago on February 2nd. So we went to Carrabba's. And side note, we actually go to Carrabba's once a year to celebrate our anniversary. Anyways, so we go to Carrabba's. I'm nervous. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Let me tell you. Remember that list that I had? Not only did I have characteristics of what I wanted in the individual, but I also had characteristics of what I wanted the individual to look like. Some of those things were missing, but again, my deeper prayer to God was to bring me who He knew I would need in my life. We had a great conversation. We ordered our dinner. Afterwards, we went to the movies. I can't remember what the movie was that we saw, and he is going to kill me because he always reminds me, but I always forget. Anyways, we go out to dinner. He goes home. I go home. And then we had the conversation, hit it off. February 9th, we had another, which was a week later. We had our second date. And then 5 days later, it was Valentine's Day. And for him, so if you ask him, when did he know that I was the one? He would tell you he knew from day one. I'm glad he didn't tell me that because I probably would have ran. Um, but I still remember what happened on that day, February 14th, 17 years ago. We had made plans to go to Spot Coffee. And when I got to Spot Coffee, I used to do photography back then. And I had my camera in the back seat. I took my keys out of the ignition, put everything in my camera bag, locked the car, and put everything in the trunk. As soon as that trunk closed, I realized, oh crap, the keys are in there. I was like, okay, well, let's just go out, do what we got to do. And when we're getting ready to, wind down, wrap it up, I'll just call AAA. There's nothing for me to do. I can't stress over it. The keys are in the trunk. He said that the way I handle that truly surprised him. He thought I was going to freak out. And the fact that I was calm, that I was like, it is what it is. I can't focus over it because there's nothing for me to do right now. That I was, because I was so calm, didn't freak out, didn't get an attitude, that really impressed him. He's so cute. But again, things started out great. Um, he physically and even thinking about it, being honest, there were a lot of boxes that he checked off, and there were some that he did not check off. But because of my track record, I'm like, okay, I'm used to dating these type of people. Well, maybe this is really what God has for me. Let me just focus on that. So I think we probably saw each other probably almost every day after that, whether it was just for a quick hello, whether it was for a cup of coffee or a drink. Things moved fairly fast. We still were not seeing each other exclusively, but yeah, me, I don't know about him, but I stopped talking to other people. Fast forward to March. So now it's like, what, a month and a half or so later, he finally invites me to his apartment. And this is where the rubber hits the road, as they say. Um, I'm sitting in his apartment. We're watching TV. I hear keys at the door. I'm not going to go into details, but let's just say it was not the maintenance man at the door. He neglected to tell me that his ex girlfriend was still living with him. Mm, you heard that right. His ex girlfriend was still living with him. I didn't know this. Obviously, I just see a woman walking in. Immediately, I got an attitude. I didn't make the attitude known, but I got an attitude. But I quickly reminded myself, okay, you just left a toxic and unhealthy relationship of 2.5 years. You don't got time for this bull crap. So I put on my shoes. I got up and I left. And he probably called me every single day, several times, to the point that he actually had like filled up my phone with like voicemail messages. And my mother called unrelated to that, but she called me about something. And she was like, I've been trying to call you, but your cell phone is full. So I told her what was going on. So I called him back. We meet. He explained the situation. I gave him my ultimatum like, listen, I don't got time for this. If this is going to go somewhere, this is what needs to happen. And again, we will leave those details for another time. Fast forward till April, same year. This is still 2008. He proposes. I said yes after my laughing attack because when I get nervous, I sometimes just start laughing. I couldn't help him. I was nervous. I was not expecting it. So he proposed. I said yes. My two younger children helped him pick out the ring, and we planned this big and elaborate wedding. That did not take place. The wedding, we did get married, but the wedding that we were planning did not take place because, listen, it was a lot of feelings being felt by a lot of people that I thought were supportive, were not supportive, and not to any fault of theirs because they knew my track record, they knew my history, they felt I was moving too quickly. But here's the thing, and here's the lesson that I want to share. The point of me telling you all of this is because sometimes we think we know what we want. And for me, I had just surrendered everything over to God. I'm like, listen, obviously my track record. You know the things that I have experienced in life. You know my deep desires, my heart's desires. You know things about me that I may not know myself. I need someone who is going to uplift me and care about me, make me a priority, support me, be my number one cheerleader, be my person, not my best friend, because me personally, I don't think that your spouse needs to be your best friend, but your spouse does need to be your person. And I got that because, again, this August 2025, we are going to be celebrating 17 years of marriage. We have already been together 17 years. We had our first dates, today, 17 years ago. Um, but there's so much more to it than just that. Remember in my intro, I mentioned that also talked about getting divorced. We had those conversations several times because, again, the reality is he came from a previous relationship. He was married in the past. I was married in the past. Um, I'm not one, I don't truly believe in happily ever after because even though I have healed and I am doing the work, I am confident, I am strong, I am capable and able to be on my own now. I still don't believe in happily ever after because anything can happen. Um, One of the times that we had that conversation, it was when we made the decision to move from Rochester to Florida. Situation happened, words were had, words were exchanged. Um, Let me rephrase that. Although words were exchanged and a conversation was had, we were never like yelling or anything about, about anything. We don't yell. The thing about it is, again, because we got married fast, we met, we got engaged, we married, and things like that. We just have a conversation. Like, listen, this is not working for me. James and I will have conversation that is like, I'm gonna need you to stop doing X, Y, and Z, but I need you to do more of A, B, C. And likewise, I will have those conversations with him because, again, even though we've been together for 17 years, sometimes I feel that because we did get married quickly, we're still trying to figure each other out. And again, the person that I am today, the person that he is today, we're not the same individuals that we were 17 years ago. We're not the same persons that we were 5 weeks ago. We are continuing to grow and evolve. And I think that that's one of the things that I want to talk about. Sometimes when you are in a relationship, you want the person, the individual, to be the same person as when you first met. And the thing about it is that you're not even the same person that you were when you first met the individual. Because again, time changes. You are growing. You should be growing. You should be expanding because that's what life is all about. If you are still the same person that you were 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 20 years ago, then something is seriously wrong. For us, my kids are adults. My kids were the ones that lived with us. Um, we changed because now there was no kids around. So you start noticing things that once upon a time you didn't really notice because you were too busy cooking, cleaning, and chasing after the kids and looking after the kids and things like that. But now when it's just you, you're like, bro, what are you doing? Oh, hey, I really didn't notice this trait about you and things like that because it goes both ways. They're going to notice things about you. You're going to notice things about them. And the thing about it is that you need to have a conversation. There is nothing on the face of this planet that I cannot go to James about. There's nothing that he can't come to me about. He won't come to me about a lot of things because that's one of his traits. He is, when I tell you that he is my number one cheerleader, when I tell you he is my biggest supporter, that is who he is. He does not want me to worry about anything. He will carry the world on his shoulders when I'm not doing anything. But he sees it as that's his responsibility. That's his job to take care of me. And I love that about him. When one of the conversations that we actually had in the past when we talked about the divorce is because I am all about personal growth. I am all about professional growth. I am all about getting in touch with my feminine side because I'm always in the masculine side, always going, 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 always trying to achieve, achieve, achieve. And when I try to lean into my more feminine side, where I try to slow down and things like that, when I try to do like healing and things like that, I would rather read a book or go out and do something than watch TV. He enjoys watching TV. Don't get me wrong, I do have my favorite shows that I will binge watch, but my go to, I prefer to read a book. I had a conversation with a friend of mine and I was telling her, my frustrations. And she asked me, well, does he stop you from doing the things that you want to do? The things, the goals that you want to achieve? What is his role? Let me tell you what this man's role is. when I had the idea to move to Florida, it was my idea, not his. He backed me up 100%, no questions asked. We developed a plan. And although the word divorce um, was had, we discussed that, was because of another situation that occurred, which I will talk about later on. But it was my idea when we were living in Florida. And then I decided, let's go to Texas. That was actually like a big cluster hell all broke loose. There was a big miscommunication between a job that he was going for and actually got interviewed, was offered the job. However, the job ended up being in Texas versus North Carolina, which is where we thought we were originally going to go. But we just went with it when he decided to come back to Rochester and things like that. I stayed in Texas living by myself for 6 months, and it was amazing. Um, but again, he put my needs ahead of his. No questions asked. If I want to go travel, whether it's a girls' trip, whether it's for an event, he would tell me, are you flying? Are you going with somebody else? Am I going with you? What's the plan? He will pack, if we're driving, he will gas up the car, clean the car, take the suitcases to the car, drive half the way, we'll switch and things like that. So the way he gives back to me is by allowing me to be me. No jealousy, no comparison, no, I think I'm better than him, no, I'm leaving him behind. And that was my fear. That was my fear. I feared that I would be leaving him behind because I'm doing all these things, writing all these books, getting awards, traveling all the time to Maryland, went to Barbados for a speaking engagement, and so much more. And his job, the way he sees it is to support me unconditionally. He will ask me, are you sure? Okay, if you're sure, let's go. What do I need to do? This man will do anything. And the reason why I thank God every single day for him is because God knew where I would be 17 years later. The person that I was in 2008 has certain goals, has certain dreams, not to the level of where I am today. And had I stayed in the relationship that I was in, had I gotten back with any of, you know, exes, that we had a conversation about getting back together when I left that toxic relationship, had it worked out with any of those individuals, I would not be the Marianne sitting here talking to you, sharing intimate details about our relationship, because those men were not and are not strong enough to handle who I am today. Somebody who is vocal, somebody who is open, somebody who is very independent. But yet, even though I'm very independent, I am very dependent on my husband as a husband, as the head of the household. James is the head of the household. It's not about who makes more money, whose title is what. It is all about respect. When we have a major decision to make, we sit down and we talk about it. Okay, well, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts? This is why I think this way. This is why I think that way. And this is what we need to do. And we compromise. So I want to give you 5 quick tips or 5 traits that when you are ready for someone, or if you already are in a relationship with someone, that this individual should have, because without these traits, I don't think that a relationship will be, safe, will be not necessarily safe, but long lasting. That's the word, will be long lasting. So, number one, having your own goals, having your own dreams, having your own aspirations, they do not need to be the same. That was one of my biggest mistakes. I thought that we had to have the same goals, the same dreams, and things like that. Because if the goals differed, then he will be moving too, ahead of me. I will be moving too ahead of him and things like that. No, you are an individual. Yes, if you're married, two become one, but you are still an individual, because at the end of the day, anything can happen, and you end up being by yourself. Then what? Number two, when it comes to religious beliefs, I personally believe it does not need to be the same faith, but you do need to have the same beliefs. James and I do believe in God, um, but as far as going to church every single Sunday and things like that, I'm not doing that. He understands why. He understands my relationship with God. I respect him. He respects me. And we respect each other when it comes to that. Number three, your person should be your person. I don't believe that your significant other should be your best friend. And I only say that from the standpoint of there are times that I have something going on and I want to share, the news with somebody. Yes, he is the person that I always want to share my news with because he's my person. But sometimes there are things that I just want to bounce off a best friend, my girlfriend, that I don't necessarily need to go to him with all the details because it just doesn't make any sense. I just go to him with the meat and potatoes and I leave, everything else, the vegetables to the sides. Um, and I just focus on that. Number, oh, so going back to having your person, I also don't think that it is wise for an individual, if you are a woman, you should not have male friendships unless you have met those friends have met your spouse and your spouse is okay with it. Not that they're trying to control you. It is all about respect. It is not about trusting you. It is not about um thinking that something is going to happen. Men have a sixth sense about reading other men, just like women have a sixth sense about reading other women. So if you're a man, you should not be having no female friends that your wife is not okay with. And if you are a woman, you should not be having male friends that your spouse does not agree with and that are okay with. Um, Number 4, number 4, I lost track. Um, your relationship, it should be supportive and full of trust and respectful. You all know, or if you don't know, you're going to know now. I am always doing girls only trips. I am traveling all over the place from Dominican Republic to Mexico to Bali, just with girlfriends. When I went to Barbados, I went by myself, even though that was for a speaking engagement, and then connected with a group of ladies, but I went by myself. And if you are with somebody who does not trust you, that's an issue. That is an issue because one of the things that I love that James says, because people, number one, are nosy. And people are, well, aren't you afraid that she's going to cheat on you? He's like, if she's going to cheat, she's going to cheat here in Rochester. Why does she need to go out the country for that? And that's probably something that has always been inside of her. It's not just going to happen. Um, so it's like you need to be with somebody who is trustworthy, somebody who is respectful of your space, of your time, because again, your time, your me time is not going to look the same as his time. So respect and trust are up the utmost. And number 5, always make time for each other. Whether you are in a relationship, I mean, not in a relationship, whether you have children, whether your kids are grown and gone, whether they have come back home, whatever the situation is, make time for each other. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate. It could be just, going to a coffee shop and having a cup of coffee. It could be just curling up on the couch and shutting off your phone and spending time with one another. Because again, eventually the kids are going to grow up, the kids are going to go away. Life may happen and they may have to come back. But even if they do come back, they are adults. So you don't have to cater, and take care of their every single need because they're adults. They can manage and handle things for themselves. Um, so just make sure that you spend time to reconnect with one another. And at least once or twice a year, take time to unplug fully and get out of town, go on vacation. And again, you are able to do this. Sometimes I hear, well, we can't afford it. Yes, you can afford it because you're planning it. You don't have to go away out of town next week or something like that. And you don't even have to go out of town. You can just go to the hotel in the next zip code, because again, the purpose of it is to focus on you. Find out what your goals are, find out what makes you happy, and focus on that. Your significant other should not be your happiness, should not be, oh, he completes me, or she completes me. No, happiness comes from within. So you should be able to make yourself happy. So, again, I just wanted to dedicate this episode to my dude. As people know, I call him my dude, my number one cheerleader, my supporter. I love you to the moon and back. Thank you for always encouraging me. Thank you for loving me the way that you do. Thank you for challenging me. Thank you for always being there for me. And thank you for still opening the door 17 years later. Make sure that you share this with a friend or two. Make sure that you also go on the show notes to sign up for the workshop. And also, if you would like a copy of the book, A Praying Wife in Waiting, I will have that also in the show notes. And tune in for next week, where we are going to be talking about what if I don't like myself, let alone love myself? What do I do? Have a beautiful day. Remember that you are fearless, you are fabulous, you are a priority, and you matter.